Teachers of Reddit, what is the most ridiculous thing you've heard a parent say? Here's my favorite ridiculous parent story with a happy ending. Kid obviously forged a signature of dad on a failed test. Teacher calls the kid out on it. Dad comes in and insists it is in fact his signature. His little prince can't get in trouble after all. 2 weeks or so later, the dad comes into school outraged that he hasn't been informed of the big project causing the little prince so much stress. But you have been informed, says the teacher. Here's the slip I sent home for all the parents, and that's your signature, right? Right, says dad. This was middle school. The parental signing of tests at that age is not uncommon, especially in a private school. The big project was a science fair-esque experiment. Exactly the type of thing parents insist on knowing about. I taught the kid, but I teach Spanish. We had weekly grade-level meetings, and every week this young man was discussed, mostly unhappily. I can still see the look of sad resignation on my former colleague's face as she told the first conversation, and righteous vindication following the second. So many forgers. In middle school, do any kids really think they can get away with forging their parent's signature? And also, come on, Dad, don't say it's your signature. It can be a cool move for okay purposes. Like, I don't know if they need a signature for something really stupid, but it sounds like you're just enabling some bad behavior here. Story 2. My wife is an elementary school teacher and suspected that one of her students may be autistic. The kid wouldn't communicate well at all, had issues with using the bathroom, and showed other classic signs of autism. My wife had a conference with the mother and explained she would like him to be evaluated, but the mother refused and said that if my son did have autism, you're the one who caused it. I'm not a teacher, but I coach my kids' youth sports teams. I once had a dad approach me and bribe me $50 to prevent a certain kid from playing in our upcoming flag football game. These, by the way, were 6-year-old kids. The kid did make a costly mistake in the previous game, but the fact that this random dad was willing to pay me to bench the kid was mind-blowing. I did not accept the money. Story 3. This family was incredibly well off. The little girl wore Matilda Jane clothing every single day, which is expensive. The individual pieces are between $40 and $60. She almost never wore the same thing twice. Compare her to a little boy in my class. His dad was in and out of jail. He always wore dirty jeans and the same pair of boots. His mom cut his hair, and you could tell, but he was full of personality. All the kids wanted to play with him. He got a little rowdy and did say some lightly inappropriate things like, "That's badass," or "What the hell?" But I would never peg him as a behaviorally challenged kid. Well, the rich mother approached my lead teacher and flat out demanded that my little girl never have contact with this boy because he's a bad influence. She's not to sit by him or speak to him or play with him. When we refused, she gave all these instructions to her daughter, who would approach the little boy and announce to the whole class, "You have to leave here so I can play." People never cease to piss me off. Story 4. Parents' evening last year. Year 10, so 14 and 15-year-olds. Told a woman that her son was doing really well in English and was very bright. She actually scoffed and said, "Really?" The boy was sat there too. I asked what he was thinking of doing when he left school, and he said he wanted to go to college to do A-levels. Kids at the school had ridiculously low aspirations, so this was music to my ears. His mother interjected and said, No, you're doing an apprenticeship. You're going to be a plasterer like your dad." Now, I have no problem with kids taking the vocational path as opposed to the academic, but this kid had a chance and he wanted to take it, but his own mom made him feel there was no point. So sad. Story 5. Had a star athlete who was recruited by Ivy League schools failing my English class. On top of his general poor academic performance, I also caught him cheating on a homework assignment which he vehemently denied. His mom scheduled a meeting with an administrator and proceeded to berate me and to accuse me of discriminating against student athletes. I was the pep club sponsor at the time. Then she said her son would never cheat. I pulled out his homework and proceeded to read one of his answers. I, as a 16-year-old girl, Mom then begins yelling at him. "You can't even cheat right. What's wrong with you? How are you going to get in college if you can't cheat?" Hey, Mom has a point. How is he going to get in college if he can't cheat? As far as I'm concerned, if you're going to cheat, you got to do it well. But also, probably just don't. Story 6. Multiple times over the school year, she emailed me with something like, "My child has been coming home saying she has no homework in your class. I believe she should be having homework from your class every day. Could you please give her some homework?" 1. There was homework. 2. The kid was not turning any in that quarter. And 3. The zeros were all reflected in the online grade report, which the parent apparently refused to read. Story 7. Every single adult should know where every single child is on campus at all times. The mom said, I had been giving her son extra help after school along with some other students. We were 6 weeks in, and Mom hadn't come to back to school night or made any attempt to speak to or contact me. She came to pick up her son and had no idea where to go because she hadn't been to our school before or read the after-school group flyer. Instead, she yelled at some other teachers who were waiting out in the front of the school with some of their own after-school students to be picked up. They had no idea who she was or who her child was. She couldn't ask them where my class was because she didn't even know my name. I walked up with her son as this was happening. She turned and continued to chew me out. She said a lot of ridiculous things that day. It was a complete and blatant projection of irresponsibility. Story 8. My mother's a retired college English teacher. Helicopter parents would regularly call to inquire about their kids' grades. That's confidential as per college policy. If you want to learn your child's grade, you're going to have to ask him or her.
But I'm paying their tuition.
It doesn't matter. Your child has a right to privacy. I can/will only discuss your child's grade with them.
I'm calling the dean.
By all means. Rinse and repeat over and over. Story 9. I was a 22-year-old female Asian middle school teacher in a district that was 99% black. You couldn't find another person who looked quite like me in a 20-mile radius. Had a parent tell me I couldn't possibly be a good influence on her child. After all, I do skanky things like nails and hair during my off hours. The community's impression of Asian women were that they all worked at nail salons. The extremely skewed Asian stereotypes, however, worked in my favor for classroom management, as my kids were convinced I knew martial arts. Anytime I put on my teacher face when the students were misbehaving, one of the kids would exclaim, "Oh crap, Miss OP is about to kung fu your butt." I never had too much problems with kids that year. Story 10. Third graders' parents come in with a notarized list of demands. Children in my class must be prohibited from bringing in gluten ever. They said they didn't want her to feel left out because the other kids were eating it. No, by the way, the kid wasn't celiac. It was the family's personal choice. I let their daughter choose who she sits next to every day. The class had a carefully coordinated seating plan. She'd be exempt from history class because she was too advanced for our history class, but not advanced enough for an AP class. Long story short, they switched her to a private school before year's end. Edit. I wasn't clear about this. AP at this school that I was teaching at just meant accelerated or gifted class, not referring to an official AP curriculum. And I know what notarization is. My mother was a notary public for most of my childhood, and she certainly got a few requests stranger than this. They had the document signed by a common law notary, not civil law, and actually, in hindsight, I think they just forged a seal on their document, as there was no notarial certificate attached. If it was real, the idiots had their own signature notarized on their own document. SMH. Story 11. I used to be a preschool teacher, ages 4 and 5, and we did evaluations every few months. One girl, 4 years old, sweet as could be, could only count to the number 4. She struggled with the other things, but the counting was by far the worst. Her parents come in to the evaluation and are delighted that their daughter could count to 4. We gently explained to them that she was well behind the other kids. Even the actually challenged kids surpassed her. She was obviously bright, so we asked them what they worked on with her at home. Nothing. They did nothing with her. They assumed that she didn't/wouldn't start learning till teachers taught her. To their benefit, they did start working with her at home, and by the beginning of the next year, she was ready to move up. I've never been so proud and disappointed at the same time in a set of parents. Being a parent, unfortunately, doesn't come with a handbook, and I guess misconceptions like this can happen, even though they were willing to put in the work once told about it. So it wasn't neglect, just ignorance, which is scary in its own right, but I think a little better at least. Story 12. My daughter's senior class voted a medically handicapped girl prom queen. I feared they were playing a joke on her, but my daughter insisted they all truly wanted her to win. Her family was poor, and the teachers chipped in and bought her a dress, shoes, etc. The summer after graduation, I ran into the mother of another student in the class. This mother had pushed her daughter to be popular, bought her the best of everything, pushed her into being a cheerleader, and even went to the point of trying to set her up with boys in her class. She actually chased them on her daughter's behalf. She's also a bit nuts. Narrator coming in. You don't say, OP, a bit nuts? Anyway, so I try my best to avoid her if I see her first. This day, I wasn't so lucky. Immediately, she started complaining about the student that was voted prom queen. She kept saying about how her daughter should have been prom queen. The other students just voted for the other girl because they didn't want her daughter to get it, which was partially true. It was so unfair. She was so mad. Then she started on how horrible it was to vote in a girl that was in special ed classes because she, quote, really didn't deserve to graduate. She was so poor that the teachers had to buy her dress. as if it were a sin to be poor. I finally got sick and tired of her crap, and I didn't like her anyway, so I told her what I thought. Well, I thought it was a very nice thing for the students to do. This may be the only special moment this girl will ever have. Her daughter will have many special moments. It was so nice for the teachers to make sure she was dressed as nice as the other girls, etc. She was stunned, to say the least. She expected me to agree with her, but I was sick of her. How she was nearly selling her daughter out to any boy who would date her, told her daughter's friends about her intimate life, and her crazy tirades every time I saw her. Now when I run into her, small town, she speaks and goes on her way. Thank goodness. Story 13. This might not really count, but when I was a swim instructor, this parent was complaining about how her son wasn't improving in the swim lessons. It was true that sometimes I had trouble motivating him, but I felt he was doing well. Apparently, she also complained that I wasn't the only one teaching his lessons and that I got several substitutes. That, by the way, wasn't true. I taught all of the lessons, so in the next lesson I thought the kid was doing well again and improving. I even got him to swim short distances without assistance. He was 5 years old and he couldn't touch the bottom. The mother didn't seem to think so. She said something like, "He can't just keep going back and forth and kicking the whole time." You realize that's how people swim, right? They sadly didn't come back. Story 14. My aunt's a teacher, and I remember her telling me about one strange parent encounter a year or so ago. She taught maybe the 6th or 7th grade. There was one kid in her class severely underperforming, and even after numerous confrontations with him, he never worked in class or got his grades back up. My aunt had to call his mother down to the school and sat down and tried to talk to her about it. She mentioned that she felt he had the capacity to perform much better, but he didn't. Well, the mother just denied it. To be clear, she wasn't crazy or anything, just an absolute denial. My aunt showed her his grades, but she ripped the paper apart and told her it's not true. She said, quote, "I don't know what you're talking about. My son is perfect," and stormed out of the school. Story 15. Yeah, my kid is misbehaving, throwing chairs, hitting other kids, whatever. But you took his paper airplane in 2nd grade and scrunched it up, so this is really your own doing. I think the best thing to do is for you to help him make a new paper airplane and apologize. Then I'm sure he'll behave. The kid, by the way, 6th grade at this point. Story 16. My aunt is a middle school teacher, so I have a lot of stories. They were lucky enough to get a former Olympian as the head coach for the school. At a track and field meet, he was helping a female student get a good starting stance, positioning their feet properly, etc. A parent unrelated to the student saw him touching the student's feet and ankles and reported him for assault. Even the student was shocked and backed the teacher completely, but he was still immediately fired and barred from ever working in the district again. Last year, my aunt had a kid who would not show up to class, literally, no matter what, would just not show up, would never do work or turn any assignments in. She and her principal had repeated meetings with the parents to make sure the kid came. The parents refused to do anything and said they should be the ones disciplining the child. The principal tried to call CPS for negligence, but nothing came of it. At the end of the year, my aunt was forced to pass the child despite having attended less than 1/3 of classes, because as a 7th or 8th grade teacher, she is not allowed to fail any students and hold them back. Story 17. Not a teacher, but a student. I'll admit that maybe I shouldn't have gotten involved, but there was a boy in my class who I was really worried about. He didn't do schoolwork, and I mean he just didn't, never. He was obviously clever and actually really nice, so I was concerned. One day as school was letting out, I saw his mom in the parking lot. I talked to her for a few moments and decided to throw caution to the wind and address my concerns. Look, Mrs. Name, please don't tell him I told you, but this guy isn't doing any of his schoolwork. Like, literally none. I'm really concerned about him. The mom smiled at me, replied, "Oh, it's okay. He has ADHD." And then she patted me on the head. I was too stunned to do anything but nod and walk away. We were 16. Story 18. Kid wrote a perfect sentence in Spanish as an answer on a test. Unfortunately, it was copied verbatim from a worksheet that she had on the floor next to her. I asked her what the sentence meant, and she didn't know. Of course, she got no credit for it. Father was livid, said that she had memorized it, and should get full credit for a good sentence. I responded that if she memorized it, it was plagiarism. She had to write an original sentence. Dad was furious at me and made threats. Story 19. Work in a special education program. Have a lot of really terrible parents. 1. Parent of an overweight 8th grader. Sends her kid to school with a lunch every day that probably equals roughly 300 calories. Kid is always mad. Convinced mom to start letting the kid buy lunch, which is usually chicken fingers and fries. Mom has the audacity to accuse us of making her daughter fat with French fries. Here's the kicker. Some of our staff do in-house work at their house. In the house, this girl is literally allowed to eat whatever she wants when she wants it. We're talking full jars of pickles, cookies hidden all over the house, and chocolate bars for breakfast. Yeah, we're making your kid fat. 2. Mom is super into the health thing. When we do cooking projects, she's way into making sure all the ingredients we buy as a school are natural, healthy brands. She sends in healthy frozen waffles for her kid to eat for breakfast on days we make breakfast. She also likes to fill his lunch up with Pop-Tarts and Oreos. Yeah, sure, all natural. You know what scares me the most about Oreos? The fact that I can eat them. Because by all means, it seems like there should be stuff that I can't eat in it. But because it's all fake, there actually is no dairy. Horrifying. They're vegan, but at what cost? Story 20. My child has anxiety and will not be completing your final project. You will give her an A for the course regardless of her ability to complete the research project, or I will report you to the administration and sue the school. The principal, school therapist, and guidance counselor dismissed her demand on the spot. She got a C- as a final grade. The project was a research paper 3 to 5 pages long. The topic was for a current events course, and each student got to choose their own topic. Students choose one they're interested in, so they're motivated to do the project. The class was a senior year elective course, final term, and only 4 weeks long. Tests are hard to prep for in such a short amount of time. I might get in 2 or 3 if I'm lucky. I elected for a research project instead. Mandatory weekly check-ins for help or guidance. This project was 50% of the grade, and the other 50 was participation. Edit. The student did not communicate her needs or issues with me whatsoever during the course of the class or the duration of the time she was expected to complete the project. I would gladly have helped her on a one-on-one basis if she had. I received Mom's email the morning the paper was due, 2 days before grades closed, and 5 days before graduation. Story 21. Parent of a child with behavior problems sends him to school with crap for breakfast every day. Fast food, Starbucks, cupcakes, you name it. We spent a lot of time trying to get her to even feed the kid breakfast in the first place, because he refused to eat what was provided at school and was an absolute nightmare on an empty stomach. We're talking hide under the desk screaming all day levels of difficulty. So we didn't say anything for a while because at least he was on time and eating. Except then all of the other students, who previously had no problem with the milk, cereal, and fruit they got at school, started noticing the smug kid eating his delicious pancakes or whatever he had that day. It became a full-blown kindergarten hunger strike. It was miserable. When we asked the mother to please make an effort to feed him prior to arriving at school, she said she didn't have time, unless we wanted him to be late every day. Another problem that took forever to resolve. We reiterated that the school provided a perfectly healthy breakfast for free, and maybe she could make an effort to convince him to eat what everyone else got. He would literally do whatever she asked. It was just a matter of staying for 10 minutes to eat with him. She said, and I quote, "I don't want him eating that sugary processed crap." He took his McDonald's with an aide in the classroom for the rest of the year. Story 22. I wasn't a teacher, but I was volunteering while in college to help a school district run a group field day. Me and another friend of mine were asked to sub in for a class versus class game of Tug-of-war for first graders. One class had 6 less students. Of course, me and my friend ham it up, act like we're really struggling, etc. Afterwards, one of the parents of the kids from the team we were on just started shouting at us, telling us we should be ashamed for not trying our hardest and for faking. Ah yes, because that'll be really fun for all the kids involved, just to have an adult basically make 6 kids faceplant. Or more, because it's a whole class. A lot more, probably. And then the kids on their team don't even feel like they're doing anything because, big adults. Yeah, no. Insane suggestion from the dad. I don't want to see him on a tug-of-war team against children. Story 23. I taught 4th grade next to a military base, so my class list was in pencil. Midway through the year, I got a Dutch girl. She didn't speak a word of English. Her dad dropped her off in my room after signing her up, then told me not to make any exceptions for her. She would learn English on her own. However, she was to be exempt from math because she's never had a math class before. The man was an engineer with the army. I taught her math. She appeared to have very limited exposure to it. By the last semester, she was on honor roll, including math. Story 24. I was a high school varsity coach. I had a nice girl on my team with very little talent. After not starting, her mom came up to me and said, "It is really sad that Jenny isn't playing. How can you hold it against her?" I asked her what she was talking about. Her response, "Well, her dad's brother dated you in middle school and he broke up with you." Funny thing is, I have no clue who she was talking about. Story 25. I had a parent tell me he cut his daughter's hair in a short bob because they noticed her attitude gets bad when her hair gets too long. I had another parent tell me his kid was acting dumb for my benefit, and that he is really smart at home. They still refused to get him any tutoring. Story 26. Obligatory, I'm not a teacher, but my mom once went to my elementary school to argue with my teacher over something I can't remember. My school was called Blaise Pascal Elementary School. It's in France, and Blaise Pascal was a famous person. Well, she started getting angry at the teacher and wanted to speak to the head. So she told the teacher, "You're not helping me. Now I want to speak to Mr. Blaise Pascal." I know I said the first name really not French. I don't know how to say it properly. Blé? Blaise? 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 I don't know. French and their silent letters always gets me. Story 27. I was, for several years, a high school teacher here in the UK. At parents' evenings, you would meet a variety of parents of all faiths and walks of life. For this particular evening, I was sat close to an English teacher friend of mine when the parents of Matt came and sat down. Matt was a pretty singular child, a late transfer in, not many friends, horrendous condescending attitude to other students, but also a complainer that no one would work with him, or were good enough to when the few that volunteered stepped forwards. So the parents were always likely to be something. Matt's mother sat down and opened with the line of, "Once this meeting is done, I would like to make a formal complaint to your line manager and the head teacher." Usually this would make most teachers blood freeze, but my colleague had been teaching for a while and worked to defuse the situation. Well, hopefully it won't come to that, but I'm sorry you're upset. What seems to be the problem? "I refuse to have my son be made to read occult texts that encourage devil worship in class." Matt's mother was referring to the Year 7 syllabus text, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which she promptly slammed down as evidence on the table. "I see," said my colleague, and proceeded to explain that the national curriculum had done an amount of pre-approval on this, and along with 99% of the country, had no problem with this. Matt's mother had come prepared, however. "I don't care. He's not reading it. I demand he be given something of more literary worth. I've checked the national curriculum guidelines, and Matthew will from now on be studying something respectable. I would like you to separately teach him Macbeth, which is also on the approved reading list." What followed was, I think, only 2 minutes, but it felt like 10, as my colleague slowly and methodically listed all of the occult references in Macbeth, starting with the witches, then ghosts, and then throwing in the numerous murders, I think just for the hell of it, to Matthew's mother. To her credit, she sat silently until he was done, at which point she mumbled something about still not wanting Harry Potter and left. Yeah, immediately when I read Macbeth, I'm like, you mean the one with the witches? You have issue with the cult? Why not just Romeo and Juliet or something then? Not saying that she's right, by the way. I think she's insane. But like, of all the Shakespeare plays to pick. Story 28. I was in an IEP meeting. When the counselor asked the student what his post-high school plans were, he proudly stated that he was interested in studying animal science. His mother angrily swung her head at him and said, "Animal science? Oh, hell no. What about our plans for the NFL?" The student got embarrassed and said, "Well, I need a backup plan, Mom." And she said, "Not when you're as great of a player as you." The student was mediocre at best. Story 29. After Columbine, a group of parents got together and circulated a petition to allow their 7th graders to bring guns to school to protect themselves. Don't ask me how, but they actually got the PTA to vote on it, and they actually had to have a tiebreaker. It didn't pass, though. Story 30. This one is kind of sad. Had a girl around 9 years old with severe behavioral problems. She couldn't cope with a lot of simple things and would fly off the handle. This was due to a lot of bad stuff happening to her in her short life. One day, this girl was trying to break down the office door to get some other students who had locked themselves in there for their own protection. Her mother turned up and just watched her for a while before saying, "She's behaving like this because the upstairs neighbors put a chip in her neck to track her, and it's feeding back through her ears, so that's why she's always grumpy." Long story short, the girl went to live with relatives while Mum went into a psych ward. After a few months, Mum has returned and she's caring for her daughter. It was pretty tough for a while, but they seem to be getting back on track. I am constantly amazed by the resilience of kids. Sure, the girl was acting out, but when I was informed of all the crap she had to go through, it's amazing she was functioning at all. Story 31. A parent said our snacks were a, quote, microaggression against her. We had the same snack literally every day, and it was graham crackers. Apparently, these are her words, not mine. "You expect a black child to not feel ostracized with day after day of a white people food like graham crackers?" I asked her what alternative she suggested, and she said Ethiopian flatbread. I told her the government chooses our snacks without our input, and if she had a problem, write her congressman. She trash-talked me as a racist for the rest of the year. Thankfully, the other parents disagreed with her. Oh, and so did my African-American foster daughter. There are a decent amount of racial biases in schooling systems and such that you could validly point out. Graham crackers as a snack every day. Not one of them. Story 32. Had a parent email me after school was out for the year that she had checked our school's grade/attendance website. She saw that there was an unexcused tardy for a specific day, and that, "My child wasn't tardy and I'm sure of that. Please check and change." Had another mom email me that her son couldn't write an in-class journal on such and such a day because he didn't have a pencil and was too afraid to ask me for one. I give out pencils almost almost daily with no repercussions, and apparently she didn't see the irony in the fact that in the same email, she asked about whether he could turn in a few homework assignments he had missed. Maybe he was too afraid to ask for a pencil at home, too. Finally, had Dad yell at me during parent-teacher conferences that I was
Un-American.
because I don't teach my students that all Muslims are the enemy and we should be wiping them out. Oh my, I insanely flashbanged at the end of that. Oh wow. Now that is racism. A little more than graham crackers, don't you think? Story 33. I'm not a teacher, but my mother is cross-eyed. One time at parent-teacher, my mom and my 6th grade teacher were arguing about me. Then my mom said, "My child is not a liar. I always say, look me in the eye and tell me the truth." And the teacher blurted out,
"Which one?"
which caused me to spit take my water. Story 34. I was a daycare teacher and this happened during the summer. We had 2 siblings coming in, and in their file it was clearly marked that they're both lactose intolerant. We take every allergy very seriously, and we do provide snacks to the children, so every box of snacks gets inspected to make sure the kids eating it would be fine, and we also provide alternative snacks just in case. So this goes on for a week until I notice the kid is drinking milk out of a carton. I go to my supervisor and we ask the kid where she got the milk from. She's little, so she doesn't really know, but she thinks she got it from her lunchbox. So now I'm confused. My supervisor is confused as well, and the kid is confused, since she claims she drinks milk all the time. So we get out her form and call the parent, and of course we can't get a hold of her. We agree to monitor the kid until her mom picks her up. She was fine, no tummy ache or anything, so we were carefully optimistic we dodged a bullet. Turns out, she isn't lactose intolerant at all. They're not vegan either. Her mom just read somewhere that normal milk makes you smell bad, so she only gives her kids organic milk. It was the end of my shift, so I just left. I laughed my butt off all the way home. Story 35. A mother to her daughter in 1st grade. And if that girl makes fun of your shoes again, let me know so I can come up here and check her. This mother wanted to check another girl in 1st grade, and if you're not aware, in the hood, checking someone means jumping them or some form of violence. Story 36. Parent-teacher conferences my 1st year teaching, with a mom who had been in the US for less than a year and was not very familiar with our educational system. After going through her son's grades and progress in great detail, she asks about his behavior. I let her know there was nothing that was beyond typical for a 10-year-old boy, and that he was a great kid. She then told me that if I ever had any problems with him, I should pull his ear. I said that wouldn't be necessary, and besides, we aren't allowed to hit or touch kids for discipline. She looked surprised and then asked about paddling. I told her no again, and said I couldn't imagine ever needing to paddle a student. She then asked me if she could sign a note giving me permission to paddle her son if I ever needed to, and was adamant about it. It made me realize the cultural differences regarding education and discipline between different countries. In some ways, kids get away with far too much here, but there has to be a happy medium somewhere that doesn't involve corporal punishment. I agree, OP, yes, there does. Because, as I've mentioned on this channel before, it is more or less proven that any physical forms of punishment for a child do not improve behavior, or at the very least not in any way more meaningful than normal consequences would. Normal in this case meaning non-physical. Story 37. A few students were getting something like a trial due to them harassing a few girls. All of them were repentant and clearly understood just how screwed they were. And then came the mother of one of the guys and seriously, adamantly claimed that the girls had only accused her son because they all wanted him and he had rejected them. She would not budge from her opinion. He can say that he was very lucky that we punished him for what he's done, and not for the attitude of his mother. Disclaimer, I wasn't a teacher when this happened. I was the delegate of the student council that only had an advisory role in these trials. Story 39. I had a parent schedule a conference with my supervisor. Her child was failing in my class and wanted to know why, and what I could and should be doing to help her child. I told her, well, I would love to help him out, but he actually has to show up. Her reply, well, what are you going to do to make sure he goes to your class? Another parent,
I pay your salary. My child shouldn't be failing. What do you do all day anyway?
This student is also one of those that doesn't go to class. As soon as he gets off the bus, he gets into a car with his buddies and they go off somewhere. And another one. Sorry about the little female dog. She's nothing but a waste like her father. I called for the parent-teacher conference because the student refused to do any work. The kid's reasoning was, I don't have to do what you say because my mom makes 10 times more than you do. Story 40. I teach in China at a private school. Many of the parents are rich. We're talking servants, more than one house, sports cars. One dad had at least 3 Porsches, one red, one blue, one yellow. He would come to school in whatever color he felt like on the day, etc. Many of the children are spoiled. They have their own iPhones, iPads, cameras, etc., new and latest models. I've seen these kids come to school with a servant carrying their school bag for them. At the school gate, the servant, often an oldish woman, will give them the school bag and the child will then walk inside. I've sometimes seen these kids hit They're servants, and I've seen some of the servants cringe when this happens. Anyway, one little girl was used to giving orders just like she does at home, so in class she would try to order the others around. As you can imagine, not a great way to make friends, especially when many of the other kids are quite rich themselves. So after a few days, they didn't want to play with her or talk to her anymore. Her mother came to school and told the principal that if he didn't make the other kids play with her, she would have those children murdered. Story 41. I'm not a teacher, but I'm that kid who's close with most of his teachers because what can I say? I like learning. Plus, I hate all my peers, so. But I have some stories. Note, most of the teachers I like are the ones everyone else hates. So these are all the teachers that are widely unloved by the student body for the most part. My chem teacher once told me about how she went into the bathroom only to find two people banging. They went to the office and everything. The parents were called. The guy's dad said his son, quote, shouldn't get in trouble for getting a little action. My history teacher is an old progressive man who demands respect and likes order and rules. He's actually really chill. He's just crazy about following rules. Well, at my school, you're not allowed to wear bandanas because of gang violence. All the girls at my school like to use them as headbands. Well, he made a couple of girls go to the office for it. One of their parents came in yelling about how it's nowhere in the rule book or whatever. This man has a hard copy of the rule book in his desk and says the page, section, and number. He has them flip to it and recites the whole thing out loud without looking as the parent reads it. Yeah, the kind of dad who would say, quote, getting a little action. I can imagine them being a little more lax about that sort of thing. But still, man, at least make sure they're not doing it at school. Like, it's just illegal to bang in public, isn't it? So don't encourage it. There's a time and a place. Story 42. Not a teacher, but a student. When I was in 6th form, I got a new form and chemistry teacher. There was a joke amongst me and my friends that she was rather manly. Anyway, halfway through the year, it was parents' evening. Me and my dad, a single parent, went along. We'd already seen my maths teacher who had given me a good report, and my politics teacher who my dad already hated after his teaching my brother, but had given me a good report anyway, so we moved on. Who's next? My dad says. Mrs. X over there, I say. Where? My dad responds, so I point her out. Where? I don't see any women, my dad says, right into the face of the chemistry teacher. I spent the next 15 minutes being ripped into by my chemistry teacher, and the next year and a half being effectively picked on by her. I did get to deflect the blame onto him for my poor report on a subject I was failing anyway, though, and he was already feeling too embarrassed to reprimand me for failing the subject. Story 43. I'm a second grade teacher in a low-income area. One of my students this year had the most severe case of ADHD I had ever seen. He was very intelligent but could not sit still, stay quiet, or focus to save his life. He truly is a sweet kid, but whenever he's redirected in class, he's terribly disrespectful and rude. With this, he wasn't able to focus enough to finish his schoolwork. Lastly, when he was talking with other students, he was completely inappropriate. For about 2 weeks, this kid was a complete terror, so I was writing notes in his planner and calling and talking with Mom about his behavior on a daily basis. After his disruptive and disrespectful behavior continued, he ended up telling another student in our class to lick his balls and got removed for a day, and Mom had to come in for a meeting. After one day of bliss, Mom comes in demanding that our principal was also present at the meeting. She then has the audacity to tell my boss that she's mad because she has no idea why her son was being removed, and that I never contacted her about her son's behavior. My favorite part was that after half an hour of explaining why her son's behaviors were inappropriate, disrespectful, and distracting to his peers again, she tells us how she knows her son, and that she just felt like we were punishing her because he had to stay home with her that day. Story 44. I'm not a teacher, but a student. And when I was on a school trip to France in January of 2015, the Charlie Hebdo attack happened in Paris. All the parents back in America were freaked out, save for mine, oddly, and our teachers were debating taking us to Paris. We decided to go anyway, and one of the mothers got so mad about it that she bought her son a plane ticket home for the next day. The worst part was, that was his 18th birthday. He spent his day becoming an adult on a plane because his crazy mother wouldn't let him go to Paris, wherein nothing bad happened whatsoever. To this day, it's the craziest thing I've ever heard of someone doing. He was super nice, but his mom made him leave our school for senior year. Story 45. Not a school teacher, but I was a swimming teacher. My favorite type of parent was the one who instilled their own fear of water into their children. Laura doesn't like putting her face into the water. Will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because you've said this, something she's never done before, she will start being scared off because her own father clearly is. It's a shame. The best parent of all time was the one who I dealt with once because I was covering a lesson. A really shy girl shows up with her mom. My notes from the usual instructor said that if she's in the water for more than 10 minutes of the half-hour class, you're doing well. The first thing the mom says is, "My daughter does not want a male instructor." So straight away I'm being insulted because of my gender and apparently accused of being a creep. Nice way to start the day. Anyway, I managed to convince her I'm not going to assault her daughter, and I get told a big list of things that the girl doesn't like doing. Finally into the water, and lo and behold, she is scared crapless. Not her fault. Her mother essentially told her to be scared. Clearly, the usual teacher was too scared to stand up to the mother and make the poor girl do anything that she didn't want to do, so she couldn't do any form of teaching with her. A bit of forced dunking later, my favorite teaching practice. In the space of half an hour, I had this wee girl putting her face in the water, swimming and floating on her back all by herself. The mom couldn't believe it and asked if I could teach her every week. Moral of the story? Parents are idiots. Story 46. Kid was making a B- in my 7th grade English class. Super nice, shy kid in a wheelchair. Had conference. Dad couldn't fathom how his kid was making such a low grade. He said A, we were discriminating against him because he's in a wheelchair. B, argued with me about the subject/verb agreement in the kid's essay. And C, said I should be fired along with his former teachers all the way back to kindergarten because the only way he's making such poor grades is because we're not doing our jobs. There are two things parents don't understand. First, I'm not an expert on your kid. You spend much more time with them than I do, but I'm an expert in that age group. Parents know 10 to 20 people in the age group of their student. I know 150 a year for several years. I know that most 12-year-olds lie, cheat, and feel really bad at some point. Your kid is not an exception. The second, and this is the number one thing I wish parents understood, is that the way your kid acts around his peers is most likely closest to his/her true personality. I've had countless parents say, but he doesn't act like that at home. Fine, but he does act like it around his peers. And that's what life is most of the time. Time spent with your peers. If he's an angel at home but a jerk in class, your kid's most likely going to be seen as a jerk by 99% of the population. Story 47. Quarterly meeting at an alternative school with all the teachers and mom. Mom looks mid-50s and is wearing a tank top with no bra. One very saggy breast falls out through the armhole on several occasions during the meeting. She just says oops and pushes it back in. Toward the end, she said,
I don't know why she is always in getting redirects for boundaries. Junior high kids are supposed to be all over each other and the school is too hot. That's why her clothes are all so small or full of holes. Not all the therapy in the world will fix her, that kid, or me after that. Story 48. Not a teacher, but I did IT support for a charter school circa 1999. I caught a kid installing a keylogger and remote access on a teacher's computer. I reported it to the principal and they searched the kid's bag and found a CD-ROM labeled AOL Tools, which had a bunch of exploits on it. They called a meeting with the student, parent, and counselor, etc., and I explained what the tools did, the security implications, and what could happen if a student captured a teacher password and then used it to modify grades or view student records. The clueless, rich soccer mom looks at her spoiled brat son and asks, Where did you get this?
I got it from AOL, America Online. Soccer mom looks at me and says,
Well, if it's from AOL, it can't be bad. They wouldn't allow that.
There was no disciplinary action against the kid, but the following day I locked down the school firewall so nothing got in or out unless it was whitelisted. Story 49. We have to let parents know several weeks before report cards go out if their son or daughter is in danger of getting an F or D. I send home grade printouts that need to come back to me with a parent signature for those in danger kids, just so I can make sure the parents have been informed and so I can document that they've been notified. Several years ago I sent one home with a student that was struggling. She brought it back signed by her mom the next day. Great, filed it away, and sure enough, a few weeks later, the student still had a D come report card time. So that's what was on her report card, and that was mailed to her house. A day or two later, her mom calls, all shocked and upset about the D. I immediately pull out the signed grade printout and told her over the phone, I'm a little taken aback. I'm holding in my hand a notification about your daughter's grade that was signed and dated by you just 3 weeks ago. Her response, hand to God, was,
I remember signing something for her, but the American Idol finale was that night, so I didn't actually read it.
To not only not read it, but to freely admit that was the reason why you didn't, blew my mind. Well, she sure has her priorities. Whether they're, good or not, well, that's something different. But she has priorities. Story 50. Student teacher here. This one isn't so bad as it is stupid. I had a pair of twins in my French class. One was quite bright, not perfect, say in the B+ or A- range. The other twin was failing by a large margin. Parents' night. As a student teacher, I didn't have to go, but I figured it was best to keep up appearances. So the twins' mom comes in and we all talk about the first twins' grades, mainly saying they do this well and this, and that they need to work on this to get past the B+. As for the other twin, we list our concerns. They're good at this, but they really struggle with that, blah blah blah. Standard feedback that would help both twins do well. However, the mom gave one of the stupidest responses I've ever heard. Both the teacher and myself were speechless. You'd think her comment was a joke, but she was serious. Dead freaking serious. And I bet it's not the first time she said it.
But they're identical twins. Shouldn't they have the same grade?
Story 51. I just finished my first year of teaching and my stories aren't even amusing compared to some of the stuff I've heard. I'm a music teacher, by the way. 1. My son can't come to the marching band preseason training camp because he has chores at home. Yes, we understand that this is a competitive group and the majority of the competition show is learned at the 5-day camp. No, we don't care. What do you mean we'll be refunded our money and dismissed from the group? 2.
I know that the 6th grade honors band is for 6th graders, but my 5th grade son started a year earlier so that he could join sooner.
3.
What do you mean my son gets a 0 for band? Nobody gets a 0 in band. How can he make this up?
No, he will not attend an extra year of school to make up for skipping every single band class. 4. What do you mean you don't give redos? 5.
Are you asking me to have my son choose between doing music theory homework and doing English reading? What do you mean do both? What kind of school do you think this is? Military school?
6. I don't care if he signed a syllabus. You will not count that test against him. 7.
I don't care if we signed a syllabus upholding our son to the syllabus standards. You will not count that test against him.
8.
I'm going to the HOA about this.
9.
I noticed that Timmy didn't get a solo. He was really hoping for a solo. Why did he have to try out?
What do you mean he didn't try out? He was hoping to get one. 10. What do you mean my son doesn't play the trumpet? What have I been renting? What the heck is a baritone? 11. What's a bassoon? And why does my son want to play it so bad now? 12. Why does this thing cost $15,000? Why can't you give him one? 13. Why do we get a letter saying that my son won't receive his grades until you get it? Why do we have to pay for the repair of his trombone? It's fine. What do you mean it's been flattened? 14.
Why do we have to keep paying to replace music? Why can't you just photocopy the music? What's a copyright law?
15.
We have a legitimate family concern. That's why Mary won't be at the concert. We're going to Six Flags Great Adventure.
16.
My son doesn't want to play the same instrument every day. Can he switch once per week?
17. We didn't think that playing an instrument would be this hard. 18.
The school provides textbooks. You can't provide a $6,000 instrument to every child.
19. The school charges us for lost books, but you expect us to pay for lost school instruments? 20.
We won't be taking Timmy to the concert because our favorite show is on.
21. We didn't pick Timmy up from the concert because our favorite show was on. 22.
Why did we have to pick up Timmy from the police station after the concert? He should have waited at school.
23.
We didn't pick Timmy up after the marching band show because the bus got back too late. We went to sleep.
You should have just driven him home on the bus like the other kids. 24.
We don't understand why Timmy isn't getting better at his instrument. He plays in band twice a week.
25.
Why can't you give our daughter a singing solo in band?
26. Why don't you play blank? 27.
You should play blank.
28. I know I'm part of the Band Booster Committee, and the Band Booster Committee is designed, presided, and run by you. We know we're meant to assist you in however you ask us, but we went ahead and spent all the fund-raised money and stuff on new music we think the kids would want to play. We just put your signature on the PO forms. What do you mean disbanded? Why are you firing us? 29. We were talking and think that the marching band show needs pyrotechnics. 30.
I think that you should grade people more on what notes they get right than what notes they get wrong. What do you mean notes count for 30%? What's musicality?
31.
Why would you want a trip to a musical, opera, or concert? Why can't you do something cool like a cave exhibit or a football game? There's a band there.
32. You have my permission to hit my kids if there are problems in class. If you ever need anything, come to my house after school. When I started that, I did not expect a list 32 items long. I should have read ahead. I would not have tried to do different voices for all of them. You can tell when I gave up. Story 52. My colleague was an excellent teacher in all respects and was firm yet fair in all disciplinary matters. The high school student had a clueless blowhard as a mother and had her wrapped around his little finger. He had no special needs or disabilities. After several fruitless meetings at the school regarding the student's persistently inappropriate and disrespectful behavior, the parent sent a complaint letter directly to the District Board of Education.
The school, and specifically Mr. Colleague, has no business enforcing rules or having any expectations of the kids whatsoever. My son hates coming to school because you expect him to behave. If he can't be who he is, how do you expect him to learn?
Well, ma'am, we are trying to help him learn to not be a manipulative twerp and to be a more knowledgeable and productive member of society. and we think that our teachers and his fellow students should have a reasonable expectation of safety and general civility in the classroom. Apparently, having, quote, expectations isn't our job. Story 53. Work in a variety of special needs settings where the pupils have profound cognitive and physical disabilities. I actually have similar issues, but the parents aren't pushy or a pain in the butt, just sadly very unaware or unaccepting of their child's abilities. Example from one school. 9-year-old functioning at a 6-month level. Also has a condition where bones are weakened, so often break. Can't control any movement but his eyes. Multiple seizures a day. Wheelchair user. Can't communicate any basic needs, but is generally very happy. Parents' evening.
If we work really hard with him, do you think he could follow in family footsteps to become a pharmacist?
I'm glad they're ambitious for their child, but we have more pressing matters to learn first. And no, that's an unrealistic plan for their future. Similarly, parents who get annoyed that I haven't taught their child to walk or talk were functioning at a similar level. Example from a secondary school for the deaf. Parents of deaf children who never learn sign language when it's how their child communicates, and then use us as interpreters. Drives me nuts. Especially when they say, "Oh, please don't sign the next thing to him. I don't want him to know what I'm saying." No, lady. That's what happens to him all day at home. You say something, I'm interpreting it. Then the pupil will say something like, "Maths is my favorite subject," and the parent will say, "What's he saying now? Can you please tell him he was grounded last week because he didn't tidy his bedroom? Oh, and that we're going to visit his grandma on Saturday. He never seems to understand where we're going when we get in the car." Yeah, that's because you don't freaking tell him and make no effort to do so. How is he supposed to know if he's going to the supermarket or a 2-hour drive to grandma's? Of course, my professional response is along the lines of, is there some way of visually explaining this at home? I know you don't want to learn to sign, but perhaps you could show a picture of grandma to indicate where you're going. Parents usually say they will and never do. Then the kid will return and just ask us everything they couldn't all weekend. The real heartbreaking thing is, this is the only place I've worked where the pupils cry because summer holiday is about to start. Have fun for 6 weeks of isolation where no one talks to you. Sorry for the rant. Most parents are awesome. It's just the odd few that make me want to bang my head against the wall. I can't imagine having someone important in my life at all, let alone a child who is deaf and not learning sign language. Like, what is wrong with you? Not making any effort at all? Not understanding what your child can and can't do, which I guess is just here. But like, seriously, no accommodation whatsoever. With all due respect, you're not fit to be a parent. Story 54. These are actual true stories. The principal came into the teacher's lounge one morning to tell us that he'd gotten a call from a mother asking if he or the vice principal could come to their home and help her get her son out of bed. And had a parent tell us once about how her daughter would get up on the coffee table so she could slap her mother in the face easier. Story 55. Former student here. As a student, my school was pretty chill. No big drama, nothing. Until senior year. I saw a low-life loser physically restraining a teacher as he groped her. Now, I liked this teacher. She helped me through a lot of my personal problems and acted like a better mom to me than my actual mom did. Proud to say she's still a close friend. Anyway, I grabbed the jerk and threw him into a brick wall where he split his skull open and got knocked the F out. After all the crap that followed, cops, school officials, parents, yada yada, cue Monday morning. I'm being pulled out of class by a cop. Turns out the kid's parents said the teacher seduced him, and I was being charged with assault. They even tried to have a mediation session with the parents, and they're saying, "You don't know what you saw," and "It's all her fault." The kicker came when they said they would drop charges if I spoke out against her. I got mad and stood up. I said that woman cares about me more than anyone else I know, so screw you and screw your assaulter son. See you in court. Went to court and kid got 20 years for assault and assault with intention. Parents actually said, "You'll get yours," as me and the teacher walked out. I almost decked the D-bag father right then and there. Story 56. During my time as a student, I volunteered for parent-teacher conferences. Unfortunately, it was set up with all of the students' names and who the teachers the parents were meeting with were, but it was sorted by teachers' names. So when I checked parents in, I needed to have the teacher's name to find the kid's name. I had a mom come stomping in and she immediately grabbed a review sheet asking how the meeting went. She wrote on the sheet she was extremely displeased and upset before she even had the meeting. She then started to complain at me when it took me a while to find the student's name. She had no idea which teachers she was meeting with, so I had to search through around 150 students' names to find her kid, since she didn't know the teacher. Story 57. Once had a parent there for a meeting about her emotionally disturbed child who happened to melt down over the same issue, standing in line for lunch, daily. He had this hang-up about not having enough time to eat, so he would cut in line, and his classmates would call him out on it, not rudely, just saying, "Hey, you cut." He would deny, argue, and the situation would devolve. I tried several positive and negative reinforcement strategies to solve the problem, but nothing worked. So anyway, he's melting down worse than his usual self. And she says, I would like to go talk to him about following the rules and such. Nope. She goes out and tells him she's going to transfer him to another school to avoid all of the, quote, bullies. Story 58. Can I chime in even though I was only support staff? The school I worked at had a library club, which is where the 5th graders would come in to help out in the library, basically put books away. Every single one of them was a piece of crap for various reasons, but there was one particular little bastard, call him Mike, whose crappy behavior was reinforced by his brain-dead mommy. Mike was a jerk to the other students. He would pick on girls, shove his classmates, and then lie to my face about it when I confronted him. He'd also never help out like he was supposed to do, even though he knew it was expected of him. He'd just get right on a computer without lifting a finger, or if he would be bothered to help, he would just stick books anywhere to make it look like he was doing something. Well, he pushed the librarian's buttons one too many times and got thrown out of the library club for his behavior. Mommy threw a crap fit about her dumpling being banned from what was supposed to be a student privilege, and the principal overrode the librarian's decision. The principal basically said it was too mean to kick Mike out because it was akin to firing him. Well, when you intentionally act like a jerk and don't do your job in real life, you would actually get fired for it. Another rule was that if a student intentionally missed 3 scheduled library days, not including sick days or unexpected absences, they were out of the library club for the rest of the year. I got a call from Mommy one afternoon and she told me that she knew Mike could only miss 1 more day before he was thrown out, but that he was to be the exception to the rules once again. I was informed that Mike would intentionally be missing library club to go watch a movie that day, but he still needs to be allowed to remain in library club because she said so? Yeah, because teaching your kid that he's above the rules will never possibly backfire. Story 59. I have some good stories about parents being absolutely ridiculous when it came to what their precious little angel deserved and stuff like that. However, my favorite parent convo happened when a parent saw the math clock I have in my room and asked me how they were supposed to tell what time it was. The clock replaces the numbers with relatively easy high school level math problems. For example, 3 is replaced with pi minus 0.14. I thought they were joking and laughed it off, but then they made another comment that they think they could figure out some of them, but it would just be such a pain to have to keep doing all of the problems just to tell time. I then spent the next 15 minutes trying to explain to them how it shouldn't matter, because the numbers on a clock are in the same spot. To this day, I'm not fully convinced they truly understood what I was trying to explain to them. The thing that absolutely destroys me, though, is that their daughter ended up being one of the brightest students I had that year. Story 60. Here's an opposite story. In my senior year of high school, I was a giant stoner slacker. My art teacher hated me. He was a first-year teacher and, for some reason, wasn't having any of my not giving crap attitude. Understandable, I guess. After a couple of homework drawing assignments in the first week, he pulled me aside after class and blankly told me he knew I didn't have any of my own work and that I was cheating. Well, my mother is an artist, and since I could remember, I took classes and was pretty okay at it. So when he made the accusation, I just smiled and told him I was actually flattered. It was like when someone accuses you of hacking in a game, but it's all skill. He smugly smiled and said he wanted me to redraw one of the assignments in front of him. Hey, no problem. He had no authority to hold me after class to do that, but I did it just for the satisfaction. After I redrew the assignment, he looked at me and said, Okay, maybe you did that one, but I don't believe the rest. Do another. No. He kept accusing me of cheating, and it came to the point where we had to have a meeting between him, my parents, and the principal. The art teacher was excused from the meeting after getting heated, and the principal apologized. The high school principal was also my principal in middle school before he got promoted, and knew that I was always involved in the art program when I was younger. I kept taking the class because I liked art, but ultimately I dropped it a month later because I couldn't take the teacher's snide attitude. It's been 10 years and I still don't get it. I did all of your assignments on time and really well, but you still thought I was a cheating lazy jerk? I was/still am a lazy jerk, but I'm not a cheater. Screw you, Mr. Zook. Go screw off in your life of mediocrity. Story 61. During a mediation between 2 parents, their kids, my associate teacher, and a police officer, one woman said, I don't care about this meeting. I want my daughter to punch your monster, and I hope you all die. The 2 girls were friends, had an argument, and one prank called the other over it. They were 10 or 11 years old at the time. A single call was all it was, but these parents escalated the crap out of a non-issue. As a trainee teacher at the time, I gotta say it was the weirdest, most screwed up situation I'd come across. And I remember sitting there thinking university did not prepare me for this. Story 62. A friend of mine who works in a public school shared this story with me. Teachers were meeting with the parent of a 3rd grade student who was at risk of failing for the 3rd time. Teachers were concerned that the student was actually in need of additional and specific support, read special ed. The parent seemed to agree. The parent stated that when she was pregnant and expecting, it was suggested to her that she eat tortillas to help with her nausea. The mom suggested that she must have eaten a burnt tortilla while pregnant, and that is why her daughter had learning difficulties and was in need of special educational services. I feel like you could probably hear the gears turn in my head for this one. What? I don't think a burnt chip did all that. Maybe she knows something we don't. Story 63. Most ridiculous thing a parent has done. As told to me by my mentor teacher when I was an intern. Mom of a kid who I was teaching in the 3rd grade at the time had left several of her kids unattended for a few days while she ran off with a carnival worker that was working in the town. Law enforcement did intervene, but somehow she still had the kids. The hardest part for me was that he was always hungry and tired. He could barely function each day. He would also complain about his baby brother screaming throughout the night and throwing things at him. Some days I would ask him to stay behind while the other kids went out to activities, so I could give him a snack that I would bring from home. I talked to my mentor teacher about all this, and she said the mom was currently under investigation. I have no idea what happened in that situation after I left. It was so heartbreaking and still is. Well, that's a depressing one to end it on. I do hope the kids get put into a better environment at the very least. Although I know foster care isn't exactly outstanding, this mom is just downright neglectful. Leaving the children alone for multiple days and not getting the children taken away is astounding to me. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, that's all the stories we have for today. Sorry to end it like that, but for now I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are, and I will see you in the next one.